If you've clicked on this video, then you'd know that the main character of ReZero, Natsuki Subaru, dies. A lot. A brief explanation of his return by death. Subaru's unique ability to go back to a certain point in time after his death, he's able to reshape events that go into his favor. Putting that aspect aside, the show has built this reputation for being known as suffering the anime. And that is because a lot of the deaths that Subaru experiences in this fantasy world are, to put it lightly, traumatizing. Subaru has been beheaded, eaten alive, tortured, frozen to death, cursed, crushed, had his organs pulled out, has been stabbed in the back, even though he was walking past them and they weren't facing him. No, he walked into my blade. Sure, buddy, that's just not how it works. So if you are for some reason watching this video and you haven't seen ReZero, then you're probably thinking that this is pretty fucked. And if you have watched it, then you'd think, yeah, it is pretty fucked. This is my not so subtle way of saying that because we see Subaru die in the most gruesome and unforgiving ways, we obviously get to see the mental and psychological toll it takes on him. To the average viewer who watches ReZero, seeing all this pain and suffering, it's easy to undermine just how well thought out this ability is from a narrative perspective. This story is set in a genre where you have all these overpowered protagonists who effortlessly solve all their problems and overpower their enemies, while simultaneously bagging at least 4 women who won his Excalibur. ReZero's take on this is so unorthodox and original that it's hard to look deeper into it and just view it as pointless suffering. But today I have a counter argument to this. Subaru's ability is not just meant for suffering. It's not just a subversion of the isekai genre where you have the MC who's weaker than most and dies. What I am saying is that all of Subaru's deaths play into whichever psychological issue he is going through in the context of the given arc his deaths take place in. At the time of making this video, the ReZero anime currently has 3 seasons that are available to watch, and in that it has adapted 5 whole arcs from the light novel. And each individual arc has a specific psychological issue Subaru is dealing with that also plays into why he's even dying in the first place. Now, all of these issues play into an even bigger spectrum that delves into what's wrong with Subaru overall. And I thought it would be interesting to go back and look at each arc and see the mistakes that Subaru makes that causes him to die and how it plays into his character development. Now, obviously each arc is different in the sense that some have Subaru die less and some have Subaru die a lot more. This is because not all issues have the same level of depth. However, they still all fall into the themes that allow Subaru to grow and develop. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that Subaru could have done a 100% speedrun Dark Souls 0 deaths run. When I say Subaru's deaths are due to fundamental character flaws, I mean the cases where it seems like he's at a standstill and not progressing. There are times where no matter what Subaru does, he's going to die. That's just how unforgiving the ReZero world is. But with that being said, let's jump all the way back to 2016 with Season 1. Arc 1, which covers the first 3 episodes, has Subaru being summoned to another world for some reason. Why? Well, at this point, we don't fucking know. Now, this is an interesting arc for Subaru because on the surface, it doesn't really seem like much. Subaru gets summoned, meets an elf baddie, and dies trying to help her. Then of course, you know the natural order of events, he just goes back in time to before he died and figures out ways to both save everyone who's a victim of this insanely hot psychopath. She's the literal definition of don't stick your dick in crazy, and as well save himself in the process. Now, this is a very broad view of the arc, and honestly, on its own, it's pretty difficult to get anything substantial from it. Well, actually, if you're watching it for the first time, it's impossible to get a 100% sure, accurate answer. It's funny too because it's definitely the worst arc in ReZero, which says a lot because I love Arc 1. In retrospect, this arc has a very deep underlying issue for Subaru that you just can't figure out on its own until you've watched at least all of Season 1. For this to make sense, we really need to understand the roots of Subaru's character, which is that he utterly hates himself, he loathes himself, he thinks he's useless. With this in mind, the underlying idea of what issue Subaru is specifically going through in Arc 1 is a lot more clearer than what it originally was. Subaru doesn't want to be Subaru. From the opening, you can visually see that this boy looks depressed as fuck. His eyes have no life to them. His movements are slow and stiff. So when you see him summoned to another world, it's insane how much of a contrast you get. His eyes are full of life. His movements are so exaggerated as he's experiencing something he never thought he'd get. Well, at least in his mind. A second chance. Subaru comes from modern day Japan, which means that his perceived perception of what it's like to be summoned into another world is skewed at best. Isekai, the genre where the protagonist is sent to another world and he's given this broken ability that makes his life 10 times easier. Their dicks have suddenly grown 10 inches from just being in this new world. They could start tap dancing and these women with the personality of cardboard would all start worm dancing to him. So this is what he thought would happen, however he quickly had his expectations thrown out into the hemisphere. This guy can't read the language, he's got no money so he can't buy any food, and to top it off, his dick is still the same size. This is me saying that Subaru is still the same even in another world. Yes, he got his broken ability, however, it's not at all what he thought it would be like. And the thing is, it's very hard to see how this affects Subaru because despite how much this would have broken him, that did not stop this man from trying. He tried so hard to put on this front that he's capable of these difficult situations that he single-handedly tricked everybody who was watching the show. Subaru doesn't want to be Subaru. That person is weak and arrogant and prideful and just scum personified. And remember, at this point, the audience doesn't know this. Who would want to be Subaru? So what do we get instead? We get a kid who's pretending to be capable, but in actuality, he's someone who's way in over his head that got lucky that he met the strongest being in the entire ReZero universe, both past, present, and probably future. Reinhard. Now, I'm not saying Subaru was useless, far from it. Without him, the events of the loot house would have been devastating. And this issue of Subaru faking everything, doing it so well that he fooled the internet and as well tried to fool himself, this is just a small part that doesn't get resolved until way later into the season. Just look at the way Subaru dies in the first arc. He walks into a suspicious loot house that houses stolen items. What normal person does this? In what world do you think, yes, a suspicious loot house that is in the bumfuck of nowhere? I'ma just go into the suspicious looking loot house in the bumfuck of nowhere and get this very important insignia back. He gets stabbed in the back because, in his words, he doesn't have the time to deal with them. This mistake of pretending that he's suddenly someone who's extremely capable despite having done no action so far that have proven any of that, no shit he dies as much as he does. And it's very easy to overlook this and just come to the conclusion that Subaru is stupid. But that's just dishonest because Subaru isn't dumb. He's not the smartest guy in the room, but he's by no means an idiot. He's just not being honest with himself, because when you feel so low about yourself and you're given a second chance to do something about it, it's a lot easier to pretend you're changing than actually taking that step forward to be better. Arc 2, which covers episodes 4 to 11, is definitely a step up from the previous arc. We get introduced to a variety of new characters ranging from cute maids to a very suspicious clown that's probably on the registry. I'm sorry, Roswell, but you look creepy as fuck. The purpose of this arc is to introduce the main cast that'll later be known as the Amelia Camp. Now, in terms of Subaru's issues for this is probably the one arc where I can't really blame him for why he makes some of the choices that he does. If we strip his issues in this arc to its bare bones, then it's clear that it all comes down from a lack of trust. Most of Subaru's deaths in this arc stem from a core understanding of Subaru's past, believe it or not. Just something very quick about his backstory, he never had friends. At least in the sense where he actually had a close bond with them. So when he's put in this new environment where he's working with people who he's going to be living with from now on, it's a given that he's going to want to create connections with them. And for the most part, for someone that's never really had that, aside from his parents, he does pretty damn well. Despite how oblivious he is to the world around him and how he's perceived thanks to this beautiful miasma that envelops his entire body, he, while still in the early stages, unknowingly becomes more trusted as time goes on simply by being himself. While still shaky, I wholeheartedly believe that if the witch beast attack never happened, then Subaru would have become more and more trusted as time goes on. However, in a cruel twist of fate, Subaru dies in his sleep. In terms of deaths, I feel this one is highly underrated simply because it's not flashy. We don't see his head get chopped off, we don't see him getting eaten alive, he just dies. But in the context of this specific arc, it is extremely cruel that he dies this way because, as I said earlier, he's never had connections before. So for someone who feels as if he's slowly becoming friendly with these people, for him to just randomly die in a place where he's sleeping with all these people, then it's gonna plant these seeds of doubt in his head. It'll leave you questioning, who killed me? I thought these were good people. Why is this happening? If Subaru just had trust in these people, then he probably would have suffered a lot less in this arc. However, that's an extremely tall order for people who he's just met, so as I said earlier, this is the one arc where I can't blame him for his actions. It isn't until he figures out that his first death wasn't by anyone in the mansion, and on a fundamental level, he understands that the people he cherishes are good people, that he's able to make the plunge to trust them, which just happens to be him jumping off a cliff to his death. This is an insane choice because whilst knowing they didn't cause his original death, both Rem and Ram each killed him in a different loop. So to be able to put that aside and still see the good in them goes to show the heroic aspects of his character. And what happens? With the knowledge he's gained from previous lives, he figures out what is really going on and saves the village from a disaster that was unfolding while also earning the trust of everyone around him. I love how all these arcs intertwine with each other in such unusual ways that you can make a connection from seemingly unrelated events. Subaru succeeded in this arc by trusting that all these experiences he's had with these people weren't fake and that the connections he'd formed with them were genuinely real. I think Arc 2 is criminally underrated with its slower pacing and murder mystery type feeling. It somehow built this reputation for being the worst arc in ReZero, which baffles me. So if Arc 1 and 2 were small parts of Subaru's overall issues, then Arc 3 is when everything implodes on its head. Covering episodes 12 to 25, this is where shit hits the fan. This arc strips everything that's good about Subaru and forces you to suffer in everything that makes him bad. From this point, it becomes obvious what issues Subaru has and how it impacts his decisions and what ultimately leads to him dying. In this arc, his arrogance and entitlement are in full display, and what's worse is that the issues he didn't deal with in Arc 1 is starting to bite him in the ass as he doesn't have a Reinhard for him to save the day anymore. So this means that he is still way in over his head. This is arguably one of the best arcs in the entire series. And what it does for Subaru's character is still being felt till this day over a decade later. A lot of the mistakes Subaru make in this arc that causes his deaths all stem from the rotten aspects behind his character. Blindly rushing into danger without a plan, hoping things will go well, blaming others for his own shortcomings, getting mad at others for things not going the way he wants them to go. One thing I briefly spoke about is how Subaru doesn't want to be Subaru. This is the arc where the mask he desperately puts together starts to crumble with all the poor and horrible decisions he makes with each loop. And it's only natural, you can't change who you are without making the effort to do so. Subaru never made that effort, and while he was successful in beating an assassin and wild dogs, when he's faced with multiple obstacles that force him to realize just how powerless he is despite seemingly being given the protagonist card with being summoned to another world. Oh, wait a minute. Even that aspect is taken away from him with the introduction to Aldebaran, or Aldebaran if you're trying to be bougie. And before you guys come for me, no, this is not a spoiler. This detail was told in the anime just really poorly. The break time episodes are still ReZero, they're not separate. They aren't planning on doing this crazy reveal because it's not supposed to be crazy. Al being from Earth single-handedly takes the one aspect of Subaru being special and throws that into the abyss. This detail forces Subaru to realize that in the grand scheme of things, he's not special. He's not a hero who will save the day. He's a nobody. He may not be who he wants to be today, but that doesn't guarantee that he won't be what he wants to be tomorrow. I don't know if it's obvious, but the way Subaru finds solutions to whatever life-threatening thing is trying to kill him isn't through trial and error. It may seem like that on the surface, with his return by death slowly giving him more and more knowledge, but there gets to a point where he'd eventually reach a wall that he can't climb over. He got lucky with Arc 1 because, let's be honest, there was absolutely nothing Subaru could have done to beat Elsa. It's honestly the same with Arc 2. If Roswell wasn't there, who knows what would have happened. So when we get to Arc 3, not only does it highlight Subaru's flaws, it also shows that he's in a situation where he won't get by simply getting lucky. Now, once you realize this, you're left with two options. Either refuse to acknowledge your shortcomings and give up on climbing over that wall, or for the first time in your life, just be honest with yourself. Honest about your flaws, honest about how you feel, and take that opportunity to make the hard decision to change. And when that happens, you won't need to climb over that wall. You can get by simply smashing through it. Subaru was originally going to take the easy way out because, let's be honest, us as humans would rather take the easy path rather than the hard path, because who likes dealing with things that are hard? I know I don't. And Subaru would have succumbed to his own flaws if it wasn't for Rem. And it's not like Rem did anything insane. All she did was listen to him, encourage him, and be there for him. Sometimes that's enough, and a lot more than people get. And by accepting his flaws, by acknowledging them, he was able to take that step back and reflect on who he is. Reflect on what he's been doing and ultimately what he wants to become. This is how he overcame Arc 3, not from luck, not by himself, but from actively growing from his flaws. There's a reason the prologue of ReZero ends in the middle of Arc 3, because despite Subaru being in this new world for a couple of months, he doesn't truly start living in it until this point. Arc 4, which covers all of Season 2, lasting a total of 25 episodes, in my opinion has the most straightforward conflict for Subaru's character in this arc. Which is funny to me because this arc is the most confusing thing to ever bless ReZero. It takes on the natural progression of Subaru's character in the most logical way. Subaru at this point realizes that he is not special. He recognizes his flaws, however he still loves and cherishes the people he cares for. And after losing Rem, he's desperate to make sure he doesn't lose anyone at any cost. In an arc with so many twists and turns, and abundance of characters with deep and complex motivations, this arc really tests Subaru in a fun and unique way. You can actually trace this all the way back to Season 1 Episode 7, where Subaru makes the choice to save everyone at the cost of his own life. This choice, whilst with good intentions, almost single-handedly ruined him for a whole season later. Subaru is so focused on saving everyone that he neglects something so obvious that it's staring at you right in the face. He is also someone that should be saved. This fatal misunderstanding is what causes Subaru to suffer so much throughout the first half. His disregard for certain loops the moment things don't go perfectly, his complete lack of care for his own life to the point he'd commit toaster bath the minute things look bleak. And to an extent, I can't blame him. If you have the power to save the people you care about from a horrible fate, then naturally you're gonna do it. There's a common theme present in ReZero that you can't do anything alone, and this arc is no exception. Subaru carrying everything on his back because there's no one he can go to is completely disrespectful to every single person who wants to help him. Not only him, Amelia, Garfield, shit, even Roswell. They complete their goals alone. They need support just like anyone else. It's not until the literal Witch of Envy has to tell this motherfucker that, hey, I gave you this broken ability, sure, but that doesn't mean you should just have it in your mind to forfeit your life if things go wrong. Otto, the MVP who's able to break Subaru from his destructive tendencies and finally stop relying on his powers, is what allows Subaru to stop dying and actually accomplish everything he sets out to do. And funny enough, it's not by relying on the power he was given. Now, I've spoken a lot about Season 2 in multiple different videos about this specific topic, so if you want to hear about my thoughts on that, then check them out. And finally onto Arc 5, which covers all of Season 3, consisting of 16 episodes and like an episode of Season 4, but we don't talk about that. What horrible issues does Subaru go through in this arc? What trials and tribulations does he need to overcome so that he can grow? Honestly, not much. While Subaru does die a couple of times at the start, that trend doesn't seem to keep going as Subaru takes in all the lessons he learned from the other arcs, and manages to survive for the majority of Arc 5. This is an outlier in the sense that Subaru would usually die, then his flaws are what would keep him from progressing any further. But Subaru doesn't have any flaws he needs to overcome in this arc. He trusts his comrades, he values his life, he relies on everyone for the things he lacks in. This arc is a representation of how far Subaru has come since the beginning of the series, and how he's able to overcome these extreme odds without relying on his ability for a huge chunk of the season. And I feel like that's the perfect place to end it. Subaru's suffering isn't for the sake of suffering, it's to emphasize how one's flaws can force them into a never-ending cycle of misery that will only get better once you're able to overcome these flaws. Subaru is an example of a character that starts off with so many issues, but through these key lessons he learns throughout the series, he's able to not only grow from this stagnant state he's been in for years, but be the person who he's always had the potential of becoming. Now I would say I wish this trend continued, however with Arc 6 things don't go according to plan, and gladly because this arc is such a ride that no one is ready for, and it's amazing how Tappe is still able to flesh out Subaru's character in ways no one expected. Realistically, Arc 5 should have been the end of Subaru's character arc, but even now 9 arcs later there's still more to Subaru that's constantly evolving, and I for the life of me can't begin to imagine how he's going to be at the end of the series. So that's that. I don't know if you guys have realized yet, but I love ReZero, and if you guys like this video and want to see more ReZero content, then consider giving this video a like, and subscribing would mean a lot. My plans are to make more content on the next coming arcs, such as arcs 7 to 10, so if you guys are interested in that, let me know. But with that being said, that's all I have to say for now. See ya.